The Balloon Ride, Part 1. Lily and her little brother, Max, lived in a small town surrounded by green hills and tall trees. They were always curious about the world around them, especially the sky. Every day, they would watch birds fly high, and they often dreamed of flying too. One sunny morning, as they were walking to school, they saw a big poster on the town's bulletin board. The poster showed a colorful hot air balloon floating in the sky. The words on the poster said, "Come join us for an exciting balloon ride." Lily's eyes widened with excitement. "Max, look! We could go up in the sky just like the birds," she exclaimed. Max, who was usually a little shy, felt a flutter of excitement too. "Do you think we can go?" he asked. "We have to ask Mom and Dad," Lily replied. After school, they ran home as fast as they could. Their mother was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, and their father was reading the newspaper in the living room. Lily and Max could barely contain their excitement. "Mom, Dad, can we go on a balloon ride this weekend?" "There's a special event in town," Lily said, holding up the flyer she had taken from the bulletin board. Their parents looked at each other, then at the excited faces of their children. After a moment, their dad smiled. "I think it sounds like a great adventure," he said. Their mom nodded in agreement. "But you must promise to be very careful," she added. Lily and Max jumped up and down with joy. They couldn't believe it. They were going to fly. The weekend came quickly, and the whole family went to the field where the balloon rides were happening. The field was full of people, all looking up at the giant balloons that were being prepared for flight. The balloons were bright and colorful, each with a different pattern. Some had stripes, some had dots, and some had pictures of animals on them. The children were amazed at the size of the balloons. They had only seen pictures of hot air balloons before, and now they were standing right next to them. The baskets attached to the balloons were big enough to hold several people. A friendly man named Mr. Thompson greeted them. He was the balloon pilot and had been flying hot air balloons for many years. He had a big smile and kind eyes, and he explained how the balloon worked. He showed them the big flame that heated the air inside the balloon, making it rise. "Are you ready for your adventure?" Mr. Thompson asked. Lily and Max nodded eagerly. They could feel their hearts beating fast with excitement and a little bit of nervousness. They climbed into the basket with their parents, and Mr. Thompson gave the signal to start. Slowly, the balloon began to rise. At first, it was just a few feet off the ground, but soon they were floating higher and higher. The ground below began to shrink, and the people in the field looked like tiny dots. Max held tightly to the edge of the basket, his eyes wide with wonder. "We're flying," he whispered. Lily leaned over the edge, feeling the cool breeze on her face. The view was amazing. They could see the entire town, the winding river, and the endless fields of green. The houses looked like little toys, and the roads were like thin ribbons. As they floated higher, they could see even more. The mountains in the distance looked closer, and they could see birds flying nearby, almost at the same level. The sky was so blue, and the clouds looked like fluffy cotton candy. Mr. Thompson pointed out different landmarks below. "There's the school where you go every day," he said, pointing to a building that looked tiny from up in the sky. Lily and Max giggled. It was funny to see their school from such a height. They never imagined they would see it like this. As they continued to rise, they noticed something strange. The wind was starting to pick up, and the balloon was moving faster. Mr. Thompson's smile faded a little as he checked the instruments in the basket. "It seems the wind is stronger than we expected," he said calmly, but Lily could hear a slight worry in his voice. The balloon began to drift away from the town, moving towards the hills. The trees below were getting bigger as they floated closer to the ground. The adventure was getting more exciting, but also a bit scary. "Are we going to be okay?" Max asked, his voice trembling a little. Mr. Thompson nodded. "We'll be fine, but we need to be careful. The wind is taking us in a different direction, so we might have to land sooner than planned." Lily held Max's hand. She was excited, but also a bit scared. The balloon was now floating over a dense forest, and the trees below looked like a green sea. They could hear the wind whistling as it passed through the branches. Just then, they heard a loud noise. It was a sharp crack, like something breaking. The balloon started to wobble, and everyone grabbed onto the basket's edge. Mr. Thompson quickly checked the balloon and said, "It's okay, everyone. We just need to find a safe place to land." But finding a place to land in the middle of a forest wasn't easy. The trees were tall and thick, and there didn't seem to be any clearings big enough for the balloon to safely touch down. Lily and Max looked at each other, their excitement now mixed with concern. They trusted Mr. Thompson, but they could tell that this adventure was becoming more than just a fun ride in the sky. After a few tense minutes, Mr. Thompson spotted a small clearing up ahead. It wasn't very big, but it looked like the best option. "Hold on tight, everyone," he said as he carefully guided the balloon towards the clearing. The balloon slowly descended, but as they got closer to the ground, the wind pushed them to the side. The basket brushed against the tops of the trees, making a loud rustling noise. The balloon wobbled again, and Lily held her breath. Finally, with a soft thud, the basket touched the ground. The balloon deflated slowly as Mr. Thompson turned off the flame. They had landed safely, but they were deep in the forest, far from where they had started. Lily and Max looked around. The forest was quiet, with only the sound of the wind in the trees and the occasional chirp of a bird. The adventure wasn't over yet. They still had to find their way back home. Mr. Thompson looked at the family and smiled reassuringly. "We'll be okay," he said. "We're safe, and now we just need to figure out how to get out of here." Lily and Max nodded, feeling a little braver now that they were on solid ground. They knew this was going to be a story they would remember forever, and they were ready for whatever came next. To be continued. The Balloon Ride, Part 2. Lily, Max, their parents, and Mr. Thompson stood in the small clearing in the forest, taking in their surroundings. The trees were tall and thick, their branches weaving together like a giant canopy that blocked out much of the sunlight. The forest was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. Max clutched Lily's hand tightly. "What do we do now?" he whispered. Mr. Thompson, who had been a little worried earlier, now seemed calm and focused. "The first thing we need to do is stay together and find a way out of the forest. I have a map and a compass, and I think I know which direction we need to go." Their father, who had been quiet until now, nodded in agreement. "We should move before it gets dark," he said. "Let's gather our things and start walking." The family gathered what little they had brought with them, mostly just snacks and water, and they started to follow Mr. Thompson as he led the way through the forest. The path was narrow and overgrown, with roots and rocks jutting out from the ground, making it difficult to walk. But the family was determined, and they pressed on. As they walked, Lily couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the forest. The trees were so tall that their tops disappeared into the sky, and the air was filled with the fresh scent of pine and earth. She noticed tiny flowers growing between the rocks, and she could hear the sound of a distant stream, gurgling softly like a hidden secret. Max, who had been scared at first, started to feel a little more adventurous. "Maybe we'll see some animals," he said, trying to sound brave. "Maybe," Lily replied, smiling at her brother. "But we should be careful. We don't want to scare them, and we definitely don't want them to scare us." As they continued walking, the trees began to thin out, and they found themselves in a slightly more open area. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. It was a bit easier to walk now, and the family's spirits began to lift. But just as they were starting to feel more confident, they heard a rustling sound in the bush nearby. Everyone stopped and listened. The sound was coming closer, and it was getting louder. Lily and Max held their breath, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Suddenly, a small animal darted out of the bush and crossed their path. It was a rabbit, its fur a soft brown color that blended in with the forest floor. The rabbit paused for a moment, its nose twitching as it looked at them. Then it hopped away, disappearing into the undergrowth. The family let out a collective sigh of relief. "Just a rabbit," their mother said, smiling. "Nothing to worry about." They continued their journey, and soon they came to a stream. The water was clear and cool, and it looked so refreshing that they decided to take a break. They sat down on the rocks by the stream, drank some water, and ate the snacks they had brought with them. As they rested, Mr. Thompson looked at the map and the compass again. "We're making good progress," he said. "If we keep going in this direction, we should be out of the forest by sunset." Lily and Max felt a sense of relief. The thought of being lost in the forest at night was scary, but knowing they were on the right path made them feel a little safer. After their break, they continued walking. The forest seemed to go on forever, but the path was now clearer, and they could see more sunlight shining through the trees. The stream ran alongside them, and the sound of the water was soothing. But as the afternoon wore on, the sky began to change. Dark clouds started to gather, and the wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. It looked like a storm was coming. "We need to hurry," Mr. Thompson said, quickening his pace. "We don't want to be caught in the rain." The family walked faster, but the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees were thicker here, and the path was harder to follow. The wind was getting stronger, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Lily felt a knot of fear in her stomach. The sky was getting darker, and the rain was falling more heavily. She could hear the distant rumble of thunder, and she knew they needed to find shelter soon. Just as they were starting to worry, they came across an old cabin nestled in the trees. It looked abandoned, but it was sturdy and had a roof. The family hurried inside, grateful to be out of the rain. The cabin was small and dark, with only one room. There was an old fireplace, a few wooden chairs, and a table covered in dust. The windows were cracked, but they provided some light. The rain was now pouring down outside, hitting the roof with a loud patter. "We'll stay here until the storm passes," their father said, lighting a small fire in the fireplace. The warmth from the fire filled the room, and the family gathered around it, feeling a little more at ease. As they sat by the fire, Mr. Thompson told them stories about his balloon adventures. He had traveled all over the world, seeing mountains, oceans, and deserts from the sky. He talked about the different cultures he had encountered and the friends he had made along the way. Lily and Max listened in awe, forgetting for a moment that they were lost in the forest. They imagined themselves flying over faraway lands, just like Mr. Thompson, seeing the world from a balloon high in the sky. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cabin, the family felt safe and warm. Eventually, the rain began to slow, and the clouds started to clear. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the forest. "It's getting late," their mother said. "We should try to find our way out before it gets dark." Mr. Thompson agreed. "The storm has passed, and we're not far from the edge of the forest. If we keep moving, we should be able to make it home." They left the cabin and continued their journey. The forest was wet from the rain, and the ground was slippery, but they moved carefully, following Mr. Thompson's lead. The light from the setting sun guided them, and soon they could see the edge of the forest up ahead. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged from the trees. They found themselves on a hill overlooking their town. The town's lights were twinkling in the distance, and they could see their house, safe and warm, waiting for them. "We made it," Max shouted, his voice full of relief and joy. The family walked down the hill and back into town. As they reached their home, they were greeted by their neighbors, who had been worried when they didn't return with the other balloon riders. Everyone was so happy to see them safe and sound. That night, as Lily and Max lay in their beds, they thought about their adventure. They had flown high in the sky, seen the world from above, and faced challenges they never expected. But most of all, they had done it together as a family. This was the best adventure ever, Max said softly, his eyes already closing as he drifted off to sleep. Lily smiled. Yes, it was, she whispered back. And I can't wait for our next one. And with that, they both fell asleep, dreaming of more adventures to come, knowing that no matter where they went or what they did, they would always have each other. The end.